Cinema Classics is brought to you in part by the Gateway Film Center at 1550 North High Street. For details and showtimes, visit the website online at www.gatewayfilmcenter.com.
Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows online at WCBE.org. I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Johnny DiLoretto, and this is
Cinema Classics.
And we are at the Gateway Film Center as usual.
Yeah.
And we're getting ready for a weekend, a holiday weekend full of bang-up classic action movies. The Double Barrel Western series returns for its 4th year to the Gateway Film Center.
I know, it's 4 years. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's 4 years, and it's a streamlined program of films. Just 3 Westerns in this lineup. 3 of the best ever made. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and the highest performing film ever in the Double Barrel series, Blazing Saddles.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I guess we ought to talk about Butch Cassidy first, do you think?
Yeah, you know, these movies each show 1 time over 3 times over the course of the holiday weekend. They play on the 4th, 5th, and 6th at different show times throughout the weekend. Let's talk about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
I'm trying to think that for me, the real essence of that movie is its sense of humor in some grave situations. Here you have 2 guys on the run who are facing inevitable extinction because there are so many darn officers of the law and others looking for them.
Yeah.
Yet these 2 carry, and if they partly do the actors, and Paul Newman and Robert Redford, carry it off with this sense that I think that no other Western after that, not that there were that many after that, can get away from having the tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, but you know what I would say is it's I don't know that it's tongue-in-cheek. I think the humor comes out of their chemistry, and these guys are, you know, they're looking at death and certain doom. This is going to, as one of the characters tells them, it's going to end bloody. And I think the charm of that film and its enduring appeal comes from that chemistry, that sense of humor in the face of certain death. And it's what gives it its weight, its gravitas. The chemistry between Paul Newman and Robert Redford, much has been said about it. I'm not going to add anything new to it, except for the fact if you have not seen it, it is movie stardom captured on celluloid like it's never been captured before.
If you blend the legend of Butch Cassidy, that is that one that people who lived in the first part of the 20th century knew about, this romantic bandit. Take that with the romance of the film itself, with the actors you're talking about, couldn't be better. I think you have a winning formula, and part of it is from the romance of the Wild West, and part of it is the maturing of that into a world where irony is also a part of the serious mix.
Yeah, you're right. That whole decade, the 1960s, that whole decade of Westerns beginning with Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, begins to look back on the history of the West and lament its passing, and lament the passing of those simpler ideals, right? So in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, it takes place right at the turn of the century. The bicycles have been invented. They're going to replace the horse, and that's really ushering in this sense of doom.
And for me,
passing. And the other thing that I was just going to say is that, you know, you had an audience, John, in the 60s that was seeing the Vietnam War on the news. They were seeing bodies come home every night, and it was a heavy time. So, you know, Westerns became something a little different during that time. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, case in point.
Well, now, as I look at Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I'm thinking, well, you know, I really grew up on Gunsmoke, for instance. And Gunsmoke had run its course. Although it had been a 20-year run, fantastic. Well, what was new about Gunsmoke? Nothing. What was new about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Everything. It kind of took, you know, I'm mixing TV and film, but I think the whole Western bit is both of those. And that's where I feel that,
That's perfect, that what you're saying, because everything about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was also new.
oh, that's
You
right.
know? I mean, you have the first postmodern Western, maybe one of the first, widely accepted works of postmodern art. So basically, Sergio Leone took his love of Westerns and all the tropes and all the techniques and all the cliches, and then he ingested them and regurgitated them in this operatic kind of spectacle. It's beautiful. It's spare, yet emotions are sort of orchestrated to the point of almost ridiculousness. But
Ennio Morricone.
No, the music
is
the music
haunting.
had never been heard of. There had never been any music like that heard before. So it was really startling. It was a really, I always look at it as Clint Eastwood taking over the John Wayne mantle, like the passing of the torch. Even though Wayne was reluctant, it didn't, pass the torch
And it's great.
willingly.
It's great that you're saying that, because I remember sitting there watching on my little TV up in my bedroom as John Wayne introduced James Arness in Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
He said, "You may think I'm in this, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm handing this over to James Arness." So
Yeah.
look at how
Little did he know, he wasn't. He was handing it over to Clint Eastwood. He was not happy about it. He did not like Clint Eastwood's
That's right.
personification of the Western hero.
That's right. He wasn't American.
No, it's interesting.
But the good, the bad, and the ugly is, as you said, so operatic, so over the top. And the role that I remember better than Clint Eastwood's is Eli Wallach's.
Oh yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
the late
Too
Eli
good.
Wallach,
Yeah.
who has my favorite role in the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, of course, your favorite film.
Yeah.
Let's us also forget, we talked about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid coming out against the backdrop of Vietnam. I don't think Leone was as oblivious to that either. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly takes place against the backdrop of the Civil War. And there we see a lot of the horrors of that war and young men dying. There's the great scene near the end of the film where Clint Eastwood gives his cheroot to a dying young soldier.
Oh,
and
great,
he dies
great
with it in
scene.
his lips and takes it up.
Excellent.
So
Quentin Tarantino, no less than Quentin, said,
Right.
this was the best directed film of all time.
Yeah, and you can see Tarantino's aesthetic.
Oh,
There,
and I
at
think
large.
he even mentions the scene you're talking about.
Oh, we can't obviously have this conversation without talking about Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
Many people, I'm going to pose this question to you:
Yes.
Is Blazing Saddles a Western?
Well, I've heard you, and I've even seen you on Graceland or whatever that is, Columbus Land.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even seen you as you repeat yourself, some things aren't, like Cabin in the Woods is not a horror film.
Mhm.
And I know you have pretty strict standards when it comes to spoofs
Yeah.
of these.
Yeah.
So I know where you're coming from on this. And I think it is a Western just blowing itself out the sides and having fun with itself. But it's like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly can't be a satire if you want to look at it that way.
I am going to agree with you. It is a Western, and I'll tell you why. Despite the spoof and its satirical edge,
Yes.
which, by the way, is as pointed today as it was then. I don't even know if you can make this movie today. That's how far ahead of its time it is. At the center of it is a very simple, like all Westerns, moral quandary. The morality is clear, right?
Mhm.
There is a moral code, and it is being transgressed. And in that particular film, Blazing Saddles, it's race and the sin of racism that's being transgressed. Now, it's funny, it's played for laughs, but Gene Wilder's character is in that classic outlaw mode. He's coming to aid the moral force of Cleavon Little's sheriff.
Sure, and you mentioned we mentioned Quentin Tarantino, and you'd look at Django Unchained,
Mhm.
which has a whole lot of racism involved in it,
Right.
but never with the power of Blazing Saddles,
Yeah.
which he just takes and blasts every convention and every cliche, and I posit that it is simply the maturing of the genre to where it can make fun of itself, and then it has really reached a point, perhaps back from which it can't go. But
Yeah.
but yes, it attacks it, but it attacks it, as we know, in the best way possible, with a good sense of humor.
That's
And,
great.
yeah,
It's one of the funniest films ever made.
Yeah.
So Double Barrel Western Series continues. It rides again. The
Oh,
Gateway Film Center, July 4th, 5th, and 6th. Check out gatewayfilmcenter.com.
You know how
Let me
many?
say that one more time.
Yeah, well, let me preface that
Yeah.
by saying, you know how many series you and I have been involved in, some of them successful, some not. But to be even associated with this series, which is by far the most successful at the Gateway Film Center, I'm proud to be there, and I will be there.
Right, so don't forget Double Barrel Western Series, July 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Gateway Film Center. Check out gatewayfilmcenter.com for the show times. And don't forget that on Sunday we will present Cinema Classics presents The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at 2 p.m.